Where do you think, from your experience, organizations go wrong regarding agility or delivery management, and what are the reasons for that?
It's such an interesting question because there's so many small factors. And I think a lot of people like to look at organizations and acknowledge, yes, they are all unique, but often go very binary with these sorts of things, very black and white, that there's the right and the wrong.
Mm.
I'm much more of the opinion, and writing the book really helped me to learn this as well and establish my own understanding, that there's shades of grey in everything. There's never something that's a complete absolute. And obviously, when we talk about frameworks, oftentimes it's like you either are using a framework or you're not using a framework. But people ignore the underpinnings behind that. There's always going to be culture. There's always going to be these aspects of dedication, capacity, workload, and the actual product that people are looking at themselves as well. Because you could be the best organization in the world, but if no one wants your product, then at the end of the day, you're still not delivering value. So for me, I think the challenges boil down a lot of the time to a few common factors, but that can be very varied within that commonality. So levels of trust is a huge thing, which goes wrong in loads of organizations. If there's not a decent level of trust, then things just aren't going to click. They're not going to work. I think arguably as well, trying to do too much at once. So on the small level, thinking about limiting work in progress at team level, but also I've been part of some very large scale digital transformations, and I'd always use I'm very careful with that.
What are they about? What are they about?
Air quotes on digital transformation. Yeah. I think digital transformation is something that has been, you can use it to almost badge up any kind of change. And so you can have someone who's adopting a new IT system and suddenly it's a digital transformation.
Yeah.
You can have people who've gone remote, suddenly it's a digital transformation. What that means is borderline nothing. And I think at the core of it, any successful change or any successful transformation needs a shared picture of reality. It needs that degree of clarity. And if you're slapping on someone else's badge of digital transformation, you're probably not going to have that.
Yeah.
You really need to have these outcomes and these clear objectives or goals, because if your only goal is to change or transform, well, let's all change our job titles, boom, but nothing's actually happened under the hood.
Yeah.
It's just like spray painting your car bonnet. It doesn't actually mean it's going to go faster. So digital transformation for me is something that I think doesn't help us. Much like Agile as a badge sometimes can't be all that productive or useful because people need to know what it means. If you're in the gang already and you've got the membership card and you can go on Agile Specialist or the certification, then it probably means something. But even then, shades of grey, it can be incredibly varied.
Yeah, people need to know what's in it for them as well, don't they? Like, if you, especially as an external person, you go into an organization, people, rightly or wrongly, believe they've been doing a great job for a number of years, and they've got the receipts to back that up. Like, who am I or you or anyone else to tell them they need to change, right? Because they've got a whole history of success, whether we agree with that or not. Yeah, it takes a degree of buy-in, and people don't. I think sometimes people have a problem with the words buy-in or the phrase buy-in. But I think if you're not bought into something, and if you're not bought into a diet or a health and fitness regime or a relationship, that, like you said, that trust is going to be fractured from the start. Anyway, carry on. If you were in the sort of the delivery management kitchen, what 3 ingredients would you say that people need to take advantage of either agility or more successful delivery management?
In terms of delivery management, and very purposefully with the book, I wrote about it not from the perspective of you needing to be a delivery manager to use it. So let's say we're in the kitchen. Don't worry, you don't have to be head chef or Marco Pierre White or whoever you are. You can be anyone. And so I think from that like amateur cook perspective, there's still aspects of it that you can use to be successful. 3 key ingredients. I've already mentioned aspects of enablement, and obviously that's a really important thing. So those ingredients of remove impediments, coach people, and facilitate. But actually, if you boil all of that down to what really does that look like, coming back to trust, psychological safety, and openness, more than anything, just being open to learn, being open to experience new things, and not being that person who's going to be on the pedestal or ivory tower, actually just acknowledging you don't know everything.
Yeah. Again, these conversations are free-flowing, right? And you just triggered a thought there. Psychological safety. Do you think that's achievable in the workplace? 100%.
I love that question. That's very provocative because I think you can. I just don't think you can ever fully be there because of the existing power dynamics that are there. It's almost like if we talked about transforming or changing society, you'd have to go back to ground zero, and even then, you'd probably screw it up. Psychological safety, I think, is one of those. It's like a North Star. You can never really reach it, but it's somewhere in the distance you should always be aiming towards. So there's always going to be some aspect, whether it's incentives that exist in the organization or power structures and power dynamics, whether it's the system design itself and the legacy that you may be inheriting, all of those factors. And even in a new organization, you still have the bias of being a man, let's say, being white. I'm dyspraxic, for instance, so certain things that I carry with that. All of those factors mean that you can probably never get to, let's say, 100% psychological safety if that exists.
Yeah.
But where you can get to is a place where actually you can be yourself at work, you can talk openly, you can find a space where you can be human. And I think that's probably the main thing, is rather than looking at each other as machines or numbers or below the neck workers, as it were, it's actually seeing someone as a whole and being relatively integrated as well.
Yeah, I asked that question because it's something I have struggled with and continue to struggle with. Because and a sense of humor and tone is to do with it a lot of the time. I feel like for me personally, and I know other people feel the same, if they brought their true selves to work and it went wrong, that would then decrease their levels of safety and mine. So I think there's always that barrier. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just trying to be as honest as possible. Because when you go to the doctors, for example, you don't care if they've had a bad day or not. You want them to show up in the best way they can to do the job they do. So yeah, I always like to ask that question because it is a difficult balance, I think, especially when you're talking about culture, trust. Does anyone turn up to work in the most authentic way? I think that's debatable. So
it's these versions of ourselves that we often have to wear at work.
Yeah.
And I had a good conversation with someone a few weeks ago where we were talking about on reality TV, there's always this manufactured self that exists. And to a certain extent as well, it's a reflection of like an ego state that exists as well, because it's what you're choosing to put out into the world.
Yeah.
I think in that business context or professional context, you're still wearing, even if you're maybe more like you and I, where a lot of work now, we don't have to rock up in a suit and tie, although for a good few years I did. Don't miss those days particularly, but there's still a mental suit and tie that you're wearing. And I have worked in high performing teams, and I think the teams where we did the best work was the closest that we got to actually knowing our full selves, where there are a few of the guys in the team who made really dark jokes, but we also understood the boundary, and also the people who maybe weren't so much into cracking jokes like that could understand the intent and that kind of stuff.
I think that's my problem.
Yeah.
I don't understand the boundary. But I think that comes from previous job. You call someone the C-bomb out of endearment, you can't do that in an office without being in front of HR. So, I think psychological safety means different things to different people, depending on the context. But yeah, interesting question. Any other ingredients you take from that kitchen?
One big thing is, as ridiculous as it sounds, is being less fussed about the labels or being less fussed about the recipe, because it's not actually going to help you make the best meal that you could.
Yeah.
So there's different flavors in every team. Let's say the team is the group of people that you need to be creating this meal for. And I think a lot of the time people think about delivery management as ultimately being something that serves management more than that. I would urge anyone who's trying to apply delivery management to get past that mindset. The most important thing to think about really is the team and being that enabler for the team. And ultimately that then leads back to the customer. And so whether we're talking about users, customers, but those people who are going to be using an end product, there's a trickle down effect. So I would say if you're in that kitchen and you're seeing these ingredients, if you've tasted the sauce and you think it needs something a bit different, don't worry about what the recipe says. And maybe don't worry about exactly what it says on the thing. If you've tried it before and you know it works, someone might not expect you to be putting cardamom into Chinese food, but if you think it's going to do the trick, then put it into the mix.